Here on Watchers of the Tomb, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber that made the aisle gleam like a thin river. Engines hummed in a steady low note that lived inside the ribs. Coffee smelled a little burned. Seatbelts clicked. Somewhere a child laughed and then hushed. On the bulkhead row, 1C Staff Sergeant Mason Vale sat straight and square in his dress blues. His kepi rested on his legs. White gloves, the chalk still visible in the seams, lay folded on the tray table. The Purple Heart on his chest caught a sliver of light and went cool against the fabric. He touched nothing. He breathed and counted under his breath 1 to 21, the way the steps go when the marble is watching. Baltimore to Phoenix, red eye. He could feel the day still hanging on him, the chalk smell, the habit in the shoulders that never slumped. The cabin had that nighttime hush that is not silence at all. Screens flickered without sound. A row of plastic cups rattled on a cart somewhere behind him, the ice clicking together like small glass. The flight attendant came up the aisle with a gate smile she could turn on and off. Her name tag read Tessa Monroe. Her silver wings had a scratch across one tip, an old line that caught the light when she moved. Tessa glanced past suits and hoodies, then paused at 1C. Her gaze took in the coat, the hat, the gloves, then settled on the Purple Heart. "Good evening, sir." Her voice was polite, professional, and already measuring. "Headphones or water for takeoff?" "Water would be fine, ma'am." Mason kept his hands flat. The gloves stayed where they were. He felt the metal through the coat and did not look at it. Cold metal, warm fabric, a point of pressure. Tessa handed the cup, then did not step away. "Are you traveling to a reenactment or a convention tonight? We get a few groups with uniforms." Mason's mouth barely moved. The accent on his vowels drifted from the southwest. "No, ma'am. Courtesy, travel from duty. I am a sentinel at Arlington, headed to Santa Fe to see my mother." There was a small shift in the air, the ripple a conversation makes when it begins to matter. In 2A, a kid in a dinosaur shirt stuck his chin over the armrest to stare. In 2C, a woman tightened a blanket over a sleeping twin, then reached and pulled the other child's hoodie up a gentle curtain. In row 3 aisle seat, a college-age guy in a faded hoodie lifted his phone just enough to find an angle. Logan Pierce glowed across his lock screen for a heartbeat. Low battery, 12%. He bit the corner of his lip, not filming yet. He had the reflex ready thumb on the camera app eyes hunting for a moment. In 1D, the woman with the small cross on a chain breathed in and folded her magazine. Ruth Bennett. She had the hands of someone who had once turned pages of paper maps in the front seat of an old car. Her left thumb rubbed the ridge of the chain twice, an old habit, then stopped. Tessa's eyes flicked down to the metal again. That is a very realistic piece. We have to aim for a neutral cabin environment. Families on board, kids who can be startled by certain imagery. Would you mind stowing the accessories and covering the metal while we are in flight? Mason took a slow sip of water. The cup was thin and flexed in his grip. He set it down, lined it with the edge of the tray. The chalk from his gloves had left a faint print on the napkin, a ghost-white arc. With respect, the uniform is regulation when traveling on orders, and the Purple Heart is worn with it. I came straight from a shift. If there is a way to comply that respects both, I will hear it. Company policy is clear on visible symbols that can distress passengers. Tessa kept her tone gentle. We ask that they not be displayed. You can place the medal in your bag. Same with the hat and gloves. Ruth leaned forward just enough that her words would reach and not carry. Son, she said, soft but firm. You hold your seat. Her eyes never left the kepi. She did not touch anything. Donna Whitaker in 2C pressed the call button with a finger that shook. Her twins were awake now, dark eyes on the dress blues. "My kids are asking questions I do not want to answer at midnight," she said, not unkindly. "Could you please just cover that pin?" "It looks like something bad happened. They are 6. Mason did not look back. He could hear the engines, the little rattle of the overhead bin as someone pushed a carry-on harder than it wanted to go. He counted a breath to 7. The metal felt heavier for a second, which was not possible, but he had felt it before. "I can drape a napkin over it," he said. "I cannot remove it." He reached for the napkin, paused with 2 fingers and waited for Tessa to answer. Logan's phone shifted, then lowered. He frowned. He met Mason's eyes for a second and looked away. The phone went face down on his knee. His thumb ran across the edge of the case. 10%. Tessa's jaw worked once. She looked at Mason's hands, at the crease of the gloves, at the chalk inside the stitching. "I am going to speak with the cockpit," she said. "Please hold for just a moment." She turned the cartwheels squawking where the aisle carpet joined. The overhead bins hummed with vibration. The plane began to roll a push back from the gate that made the cups tremble. Intercom pops came from the ceiling panel, and then a calm male voice talked about climb time and turbulence over the mountains. No names, no chit-chat. The voice did not list a military past, and Mason did not need to imagine one. He looked at the wing, the red light blinking on the tip like a patient heartbeat. Ruth folded her hands over the magazine and stared at the window, which was just a dark mirror. Dana's twins bent their heads together and whispered a hush of private language. Logan pulled a piece of gum from his hoodie pocket and crumpled the foil into a hard little ball. He set it on his tray, moved it back and forth to a rhythm only he could hear. Tessa reappeared from the galley with a clipboard and a sheet of printed policy clipped to it. Her smile had been put away. "Sergeant Vale," she said, checking the name on a small card he had set next to his cup. "I spoke to the captain. We have to maintain a neutral environment in the cabin. That metal is drawing attention. I need you to stow the keepy and gloves and cover the metal now." A breath hung in the space between sentences. The ice in his cup clicked and settled. Mason straightened by an inch. The Purple Heart was a cold point under the cloth. The chalk on the napkin looked like frost. He did not reach for the metal. He kept his hands on the armrests, flat white cuff, visible 2 stitches slightly darker where a thread had been repaired. He counted to 9 and stopped, and Tessa lifted the clipboard higher. The paper edge was clean and sharp. "If you do not comply, I will have to escalate to the captain." The kid in 2A stopped whispering. Ruth's thumb paused on the chain. Logan's phone lit the inside of his hoodie with a white glow. Engines deepened as the plane lined up for the run. Mason looked at Tessa, and the look carried only the weight of standing still. The engine spooled higher and held. Tessa kept the clipboard tucked to her side while the safety demo ran. She did not look at Mason as she took her jump seat. The cabin tightened into takeoff posture. Belts pressed hips. Bags shifted under seats. The crew's voices turned to gestures. The runway lights slid past in quick white ticks. Mason's fingers curled once on the armrests, then flattened. He counted the breath, the lift, the slight float when the wheels left the earth. The cup on his tray quivered and settled. He placed the napkin over it to keep it from walking. The red wingtip light blinked against a dark field. The plane climbed, rolled a degree, and the glow of the city curved away. The seatbelt sign stayed on. A child swallowed a squeak. A man coughed twice into his sleeve. Tessa watched the aisle from her jump seat knees together, chin lifted. The scratch across her silver wings caught and lost the light with the plane's small movements. At 10 minutes, the climb eased. The chime sounded. Buckles released like a wave. The crew stood. Tessa came straight to 1C with the clipboard. Her voice was smooth. The line of her mouth did the work of firmness. Sergeant Vale, thank you for your patience. I need you to stow the hat and gloves and cover the metal now. We have a specific request from another passenger along with the policy. I am here to keep the cabin comfortable for everyone. Mason tipped his head once. I understand the job, ma'am. He set his hand on the napkin, lifted it to show the faint arc of chalk like a crescent left on snow. He laid the napkin over the metal so the cloth softened the shape without hiding the fact of it. This is the most I can do and remain within my duty. That still presents the symbol. Tessa's eyes flicked to the twins in 2C, then back. Could you please remove it into your bag, the hat and gloves as well? Ruth leaned forward an inch. Ma'am, she said, quiet, respectful. I can vouch for the uniform. He is not pretending. Her thumb pressed the cross and let it go. She did not look at Tessa while she spoke. She looked at the kepi like it was a folded flag. Dana pressed her palm over the nearest small knee. They are asking me if someone got hurt because of that pin she said to no one and to everyone. I just want to get them to sleep. Her voice held no edge, only the thinness that comes when you run out of stretch. Logan's phone hovered at chest height. The camera app was open. Battery at 10%. He met Mason's eyes and dropped the phone to his lap. He chewed his gum and pushed the foil ball with one finger until it left a shiny track on the tray. Mason's tone did not change. If the napkin remains, I can keep the hat here. He touched the kepi with 2 fingers and squared it on his legs. The gloves can go in the seat pocket. Tessa drew a breath. We have had issues with replicas, she said carefully. People wearing things for photos. It confuses passengers. It causes scenes. We have to be careful. This is not a replica. Mason did not move. I came from duty. I will go back to duty. That is all I will say about it. He positioned the napkin so the edge ran clean along the seam of his coat. The chalk lifted into the fibers and made a pale line. The galley cart rattled at the curtain. Ice clinked. The intercom clicked and a calm male voice filled the ceiling speakers, measured and precise. Ladies and gentlemen, we expect a smooth ride until we reach the high desert. Keep your seatbelts fastened while seated. No mention of who he was before he wore the hat with stripes. No return of jokes about tailwinds. The voice did not reach for charm. It stacked facts and let them stand. Let me speak with the cockpit directly, Tessa said. Please do not adjust anything until I return. She stepped aside to let another attendant pass, then went forward, the clipboard flat against her chest. The cockpit door did not open. She pressed the call button and spoke into the handset. Her profile in the blue wash of the forward bulkhead light looked set and very tired. Conversation hummed and cut off in pockets. A man across the aisle pretended to scroll with interest while watching the reflection in his black screen. The twins drew circles on fogged plastic with their breath and fingers. One traced a heart and wiped it away with the side of her fist. Ruth adjusted the corner of her magazine 3 times until it sat parallel with the tray table edge. Logan wiped his camera lens with the hem of his hoodie and then put the phone screen down on his thigh. Mason looked at the window. His face made a faint silhouette in the plexiglass. The red strobe on the wing kept time steady as a metronome. He counted to 21 again, not to pass the time, but to keep the line of his spine honest. His right side remembered heat and pressure that were not in this plane, not in this season, not in this sky. He ran through the posture check he knew with his eyes closed. He did not blink more than he had to. Tessa returned with the clipboard and a single printed page clipped on top. The paper was neat and offered language in small blocks with bold headings. Sergeant Vale, the captain, is aware. The policy stands. Please stow the hat and gloves and cover the metal completely. She set the sheet on the tray next to the cup, not touching the napkin on his chest. "If you cannot comply, we will have to involve the captain in person." A man 2 rows back spoke up, voice pitched to reach but not shout. "I do not want to look at war stuff all night," he said. "I paid for quiet." Dana lifted a hand, then let it fall. "I am just asking for this to be less visible." Ruth turned her face to the aisle and spoke like she did not care if anyone agreed. "Some things deserve to be visible." The cross on her chain flashed once and went still. Tessa stood very straight. Her eyes had softened by a degree, not in the way that allows, but in the way that recognizes an edge has been reached. "Please," she said to Mason, and the word held 2 meanings. "I am trying to keep this calm." "Calm is good," Mason said. "I am not here to make noise." He tucked the gloves into the seat pocket, fingers precise, palms down. The chalk on his fingertips left a tiny smear on the mesh. He did not brush it away. He set the kepi a little farther back on his thighs so it did not overhang the aisle. He did not remove the metal. The napkin lay over it like a thin cloud that still showed where the moon is. The seatbelt sign chimed again and lit. The plane trembled once as it crossed a band of rough air, then steadied. Cups clicked. The cart creaked. Tessa reached out to the back of Mason's seat with 2 fingers to keep her balance and did not touch it. She closed her hand and brought it back to the clipboard. "Captain," she said into the intercom at the galley, voice lower now, "I need you at 1C. She put the handset down and smoothed the policy sheet even though it was already smooth. Logan watched her and then looked at Mason. "Sir," he said, voice small, "are you okay?" It came out as if he was surprised he had said it. Mason angled his head. "Yes, you do not need to film this." "I am not," Logan said and showed the dead black screen like a clean palm. His battery read 9%. He pushed the foil ball to the edge of the tray and caught it with a fingertip before it toppled. Dana shifted and pulled a hoodie over a small shoulder. The child inside it sighed and settled. She met Mason's eyes for the first time. "Thank you for catching the cup earlier," she said, though he had not caught one yet on this flight. She might have meant thank you for being still while everything around them moved. Ruth's knee brushed the seat in front of her. She sat back and folded her hands again. "Hold," she murmured, not loud enough to carry. The forward door opened with a soft click. The captain stepped into the aisle hat under his arm. He had a steady face and eyes that counted details. The scratch on Tessa's silver wings caught the light as she turned to him. He took in the kepi, the gloves in the pocket, the napkin, the chalk on its edge. He nodded once to Tessa and once to Mason. "Let us hear both sides," Captain Arthur Kim said. His voice was even and unhurried. "Quick and civil." Captain Arthur Kim set his hat on the empty space of 1B and balanced a hand on the seatback. He did not fill the aisle with his presence. He simply gave it a center line. "Sergeant Vale," he said, "may I see your identification and your travel orders if you have them at hand?" Mason nodded once. He reached into the inner pocket in a way that showed his palm first. The plastic sleeve came out with a soft whisper. He held it steady while the captain looked. The photo showed a younger face with the same set to the jaw. The embossed text caught the cabin light. A fold-worn card behind it had the words that mattered for travel. Mason waited until Kim finished, then slid the sleeve back into place. "Thank you," Kim said. He turned to Tessa. "Did you check his boarding credentials at the gate?" "Yes," Tessa said. "All in order." Her voice was the work voice. Under it was something else lighter and more human and not sure where to sit. "All right," Kim said. "I want to hear from both of you. Quickly." He faced Mason again. "Why are you in dress uniform on this flight?" Mason kept his eyes on the captain. "I came from duty. Tomb guard. I am on approved travel to see family. Regulation allows for uniform during official movement. Metal is worn with the uniform. I arrived from a change of the guard. I removed only the weapon at the gate. Kim's gaze moved to the napkin on Mason's chest. And that piece. Purple Heart, Mason said. Awarded for wounds received in action. Kandahar Province, Panjwai District. 11 years ago. He did not add the rest. He did not need to. The captain looked at Tessa. Your concern, neutral cabin, Tessa said. We have had incidents with replicas and with passengers wearing symbols that cause distress. I have a direct request from a family with small children. I am asking for the hat and gloves to be stowed and the metal covered or removed into a bag. Kim listened without moving. He took in the twins with their sleepy faces and the mother who was worn thin. He took in Ruth with her steady stare and her cross. He took in the boy with the phone who seemed to be trying not to record the world for once. He returned his attention to Mason. Where were you hit? Kim asked, not as a challenge, but the way one pilot asks another if the runway is clear. Right side, Mason said. Shrapnel. IED on the lead vehicle. We were second. I pulled my gunner out. Torres. He stopped there. For a moment, the cabin was not a cabin. In Mason's head, heat climbed like a hand. Dust moved in sheets. The smell of burned rubber and oil sat inside his mouth. A sound like tearing metal rolled and rolled. He remembered how the ground felt under his boot when he set himself to drag a man who was still yelling at him to move. He tasted grit. A sliver of pain flared along the ghost line in his ribs. He blinked once and the aisle returned. Coffee and plastic and air that was too cold on the skin of the throat. Kim saw enough in his face to know the rest. He nodded. Then he spoke in a voice that carried just far enough. We will not be removing medals from uniforms on this flight, he said. He kept his tone neutral. There is no violation here. I am responsible for the comfort of all passengers. I will handle any concerns. We will maintain respect on both sides. A voice 2 rows back rose from behind a seat. I do not want to look at that all night, the man said. I have anxiety. War things make it worse. I paid for a quiet trip. Kim faced the man without raising his own volume. I hear you. We can discuss accommodations after we level off. For now, please remain seated. The crew will assist you with anything you need that is within policy. Dana looked at the twins. Both children watched the napkin with the intense attention that young eyes bring to anything adults try to hide. She let out a breath that wobbled. Thank you for hearing us, she said. She rubbed a circle on one small back. I only want them to sleep. Ruth lifted her chin. Captain, she said, voice even thank you. She did not look at anyone else when she spoke. She kept her eyes on Mason's gloves in the pocket. Tessa held the clipboard against her middle. For a heartbeat, her lips parted, but nothing came out. She swallowed. Then she stepped closer to Mason by half a shoe width. Her face shifted in a way that people do not plan. My brother wore that ribbon, she said quietly. Ethan Monroe, Marine Corps. He did not make it past 2009. I thought if I kept this aisle clean enough, I would not think about him. That is on me. She breathed through her nose, a measured inhale that steadied the edge in her tone. I am trying to keep this calm. I did not mean to disrespect you. Mason met her eyes. He did not change his posture. I hear you, he said. I am not here to make anything harder. The intercom chimed as if to mark the moment. The plane eased into an even pitch. The cart creaked behind the curtain and then rolled. Tessa lifted a hand and the other attendant halted without a word. Kim looked to Mason again. If I ask you to cover the metal more completely with the napkin, will that satisfy your obligation and allow anxious passengers less visibility? I can cover it fully, Mason said. I cannot remove it. He lifted the napkin, laid it smoother, and drew the edge up so the curve of the heart did not show. The cloth lay flat and plain. Only a faint imprint of chalk traced a crescent, then faded as the fibers took it in. Thank you, Kim said. He angled his head to Tessa. We will keep moving. The mood in the cabin loosened by a notch. Not relaxed, simply less sharp. Logan pressed his phone screen once and saw 8%. He locked it and put it in the pocket of his hoodie. He glanced at Mason and gave a small nod that was not the usual social media gesture. It was simple and human. The twins returned to drawing on the window with their breath. Dana rested her head back and closed her eyes. One hand stayed on a small sneaker as if the plane might lift the child from the seat if she let go. Ruth took a folded photo from her wallet, looked at it for one beat, then put it back and smoothed the leather as if that could press it into the world. The service cart reached row 1. Tessa set the clipboard aside and poured water. She placed a chocolate square on the napkin by Mason's cup and did not comment on it. He tapped the corner of it with one finger in acknowledgement. She blinked once quickly and returned to pouring drinks. The man who had objected pushed his call button. Another attendant went to him. The tone of the conversation was contained. The words did not carry. Only the rhythm of requests and gentle answers traveled like a conversation heard through a wall. Kim stood a moment longer and took in the small changes. The napkin flat on the chest. The hat quiet on a lap. Chalk dust ghosting away. He nodded to Tessa and stepped back toward the cockpit. He tilted the hat on his arm as if testing its weight without putting it on. Captain Mason said softly. Kim paused. Yes, thank you for asking first. Kim did not smile. He let a small line ease from the corners of his eyes. Asking is faster than guessing, he said, and moved forward. Air smoothed along the fuselage. A faint vibration in the floor shifted to a different note. The crew moved with the practice choreography that comes when things run as they should. People spoke in lower voices. The boy at the window drew a circle and a slash through his sister's heart, and she laughed, then shushed herself with 2 fingers. Logan leaned across the aisle. Sir, he said my granddad was Army. I do not know what to say to people like you. I can stop filming. That is something I can do. You already did, Mason said. That is enough. Logan nodded and sat back. He picked up the foil ball and pressed his thumbnail into it until it showed the imprint of the nail, a small crescent like the chalk line on the napkin. Tessa cleared the empty cups. Her hand brushed the seat back again for balance and drew away. She looked at the scratch on her silver wings as if seeing it for the first time in a long time. She rubbed it with a thumb. The scratch remained. The seatbelt sign chimed and stayed lit. The captain's voice came through steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we may encounter a brief patch of rough air as we cross the Appalachians. Please keep your belts fastened. The cart squeaked as Tessa braced it. The plane met the first ripple. A cup slid toward the lip of the tray on 2C. Dana reached too slow. The liquid rose inside the cup in a thin sheet. The rim tipped toward small knees. Mason's left hand moved before thought. He cupped the base and steadied it. Hot coffee licked over his knuckles. He set the cup down and lifted his hand away. The glove had left a thin white print on the plastic. Dana looked up at him, eyes clear and surprised. Thank you, she said this time for the thing that had happened. You are welcome, Mason said. He shook his hand once to shed the sting and did not make a sound. The floor dropped a finger width and rose. Ice clicked in a chorus. Tessa anchored the cart and placed a brown napkin on Mason's tray next to the chocolate square. He wiped his knuckles and folded the napkin into a small square corners, sharp as if that was what napkins were for. The overhead bins buzzed as air changed pressure. A child squealed once and then giggled at the bounce. The man who had objected closed his eyes and took 3 breaths. Ruth watched the captain disappear behind the forward door and then set her palms on her knees. The cabin held balanced between quiet and alert while the red light on the wing kept time. The next pocket of rough air arrived without ceremony. The aisle vibrated a low tremor that turned spoons into tuning forks. A latch on an overhead bin clicked once and held. The cartwheels chirped as Tessa braced her foot against the base and kept it from drifting. The red light on the wing blinked at its steady interval, a calm metronome that did not care about human pulses. Another ripple lifted the cups. One in 2C slid toward the edge with a stubborn will. Dana reached for it, fingers spread, then stopped when Mason's left hand got there first. He palmed the cup, guided it back to center, and released it. Coffee sloshed a brown skirt that licked his knuckles and cooled fast in the cabin air. A thin line of chalk ran across the plastic where his glove had touched. He wiped his hand on the brown napkin Tessa had set down and folded the square small. The fold creased to a sharp edge habit, turning a disposable thing into something orderly. "Thank you," Dana said again. The word came out plain, not loaded. She tucked a strand of hair behind one ear and did not try to explain herself. The man, 2 rows back, stood halfway, one knee locked against the seat. "This is exactly what I am talking about," he said, breath tight. "I do not want any of this in my face. I do not feel safe. I want to move. I want to be reseated." Sir Tessa said, voice level, "Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is off. I will find a solution once it is safe to stand." "I cannot sit here," the man said. He pressed his palms to the seat back in front of him. His face had the flat shine of fear that looks like anger to everyone else. "I do not want to look at that." Captain Kim stepped forward from the galley bulkhead where he had been standing out of the way. He did not touch the man. He did not raise his voice. "Sir, eyes on me, please. The sign is on." For the next minutes, everyone remained seated. "We will address your request when the air smooths. You are not in danger. The crew is in control." The man looked at the captain and then at the belt sign. His chest rose and fell twice. He sat jaw-clenched, hands on his knees. The attendant at his row eased the call button back to dark and gave him a cup of water. He held it without drinking. Tessa turned back to 1C. Her hand hovered over the back of Mason's seat to balance, then withdrew. She set the clipboard on the empty seat next to his and looked at the napkin that lay flat on his chest. For a moment her face read like a window in winter, a thin fog that clears with a breath. "My earlier request was wrong," she said to Mason, quiet enough for row 1 and no farther. "I thought I could protect this aisle by making it blank. That is not my call to make. I am sorry." Mason tipped his chin. "Apology accepted," he said. There was no extra weight in the words. He reached down and squared the kepi on his thighs, the visor lined with the crease in his trousers. "The napkin can stay if that helps." "It helps some people," Tessa said. "It helps me." She glanced at her silver wings, the scratch across the tip. Her thumb ran over it and came away clean. The scratch remained. Ruth leaned into the aisle with a small effort. She did not intrude. She simply offered the shape of her story like a folded paper that could be taken or refused. From her wallet, she slid a photo the size that fits behind an ID. A young man in desert camo stood in front of a wall of plywood painted with names. His grin was wide and unguarded. She held the photo where Mason could see without reaching for it. "He liked to drive too fast," Ruth said. "Always late, always smiling. He wrote me once about the stars over the base. He said they looked like someone spilled sugar on a black tablecloth." She took the photo back and tucked it away. She breathed through her nose and found her seat again. "Thank you for sitting still." Logan stared at his phone as if it might tell him what the right thing looked like. He unlocked it, opened the gallery, selected the few seconds he had recorded earlier by accident, and hit delete. No flourish, no announcement. The screen went black. He put it face down on his thigh and picked up the foil ball. He pressed his thumbnail into it until a crescent formed the same shape the chalk had left on Mason's napkin. The plane rolled a degree and then settled. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The overhead bins hummed in a new key. The cabin had not calmed, but it had found a rhythm. People breathed together without trying to. Captain Kim lifted the intercom handset just enough to press the button. His voice filled the speakers, pared down to the parts that held. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The air will be uneven for a short time. Please remain seated with your belts fastened. If you need assistance, press your call button. The crew is here to help." He did not mention medals. He did not name titles or units. He did not ask for applause or for silence. He hung up the handset, nodded once to Tessa, and stood out of the aisle again. The authority came not from emphasis, but from the lack of it. The cart nudged forward. Cups were collected and replaced with bottles and a thin row of chocolates that looked like small bricks. Tessa slid one to Dana's tray, one to Logan's, and left the corner of one resting against the folded brown square on Mason's table. He did not move to eat it. He touched it, and then returned his hand to the armrest, fingers straight. The man who had objected held his water with both hands now. His breathing had slowed. His shoulders had lost a half-inch of lift. The attendant at his side whispered something that carried no words to the next row. He nodded, sipped, and nodded again. A change in sound rippled through the cabin as the plane passed a layer. The vibration in the floor turned from a drum to a purr. The seat belt sign remained lit, a bright reminder strip above the aisle. A child in row 4 giggled and then hid his face in his mother's sleeve as the plane bounced once more like a slow elevator that had misread a floor. Mason rested his hands lightly right over left on the armrests. He counted his breath and let the count do what it always did for him. 1 to 21. The numbers had no weight. They simply organized the air and kept his spine honest. He could feel the faint sting on the skin where coffee had touched. It felt clean. His chest was a steady drum. The napkin lay like cloud cover. Tessa let go of the cart and bent a small movement to adjust the angle of the keepy on Mason's legs. She did not ask. She did not need to. He allowed it. Her fingers lifted the visor a fraction so that the line matched the seam in his pants. She withdrew her hand and nodded the kind of nod you give a picture frame once it sits level. "Better," she said, and stepped back. Ruth watched the motion, then closed her eyes. Her lips moved without sound. The cross at her neck tilted and then settled flat. Logan leaned into the aisle a little. "Sir," he said, "if you need anything carried when we get off, my hands are empty." It was not an offer made loud. It was not for social points. It was practical, like a door held 6 seconds for a stranger. "I have it," Mason said. "Thank you." He sounded like a man who could carry more than the visible weight and had learned not to comment on that fact. The cabin light softened a shade. Somewhere in the back, a laugh broke out and stopped the quick kind that handles a spill with grace. The wingtip blinked red, then dark, then red. The count inside Mason's head matched without effort. Captain Kim scanned the rows and met Tessa's eyes. She gave the smallest nod. The cartwheels turned a steady click that marked the path. The chocolate squares disappeared one by one. Water cups emptied. Hands folded, heads tilted against windows. Another shallow dip rolled through the plane. Mason shifted a hair to keep balance and stayed anchored. The napkin did not slide. The purple ribbon under it held its shape unseen. Chalk dust along the edge faded into the fibers and ceased to be chalk. For a long half-minute the plane rode smooth. The floor felt steady. Breath fell into a shared cadence. The scratch on Tessa's silver wings flashed once more as she reached for the service latch and secured the cart. She looked at Mason, then toward the twins, then at the captain. Her shoulders eased. The red light on the wing kept time. The red light on the wing kept its patient rhythm. The vibration eased to a hum. The seatbelt sign stayed lit, then blinked out. People loosened shoulders and reached for bags they could not lift yet. The cabin smelled of coffee and plastic and a hint of warm wiring. Captain Kim's voice came through calm and even. "Cabin crew, prepare for arrival. We will be descending shortly into Phoenix. Please secure items and return to your seats." Tessa checked latches with small clicks. She stowed the cart, ran a finger along a row of overhead doors, and rested her hand on the galley frame for a heartbeat. When she turned to row 1, her face had settled. She looked at Mason, at the napkin at the keepy squared on his thighs. She nodded once, a clean acknowledgement. "Thank you for your patience," she said. She adjusted the angle of the reading light over him so it did not glare on the plexiglass. "We will be on the ground soon." On. Mason tipped his chin. He kept his hands quiet on the armrests. He could feel the metal under the cloth like a flat coin cooled by air. He counted his breath. 1 to 21. The numbers came without effort. They arranged the descent inside him. The plane tilted and began to slide down the sky. Light spread beneath the wing in straight lines and curves, a grid and a river. Desert darkness filled the spaces between with a weight that did not care about schedules. The twins pressed their foreheads to the window and drew a sunburst on the fog their breath made. Dana kissed the top of one head and let her eyes rest on the napkin one more time, then looked away. Ruth closed her magazine and placed it in the seat pocket. She smoothed the edge even with the plastic seam and laced her fingers on her lap. The chain at her throat lay flat, cross-centered. Her gaze found Mason's gloves in the pocket, the chalk line on the mesh almost gone now. She let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Logan checked his battery and saw 8%. He slid the phone into his hoodie pocket and pressed it flat with his palm as if to keep it there. He looked at Mason and lifted 2 fingers from the armrest in a small salute that looked nothing like a salute. Mason returned it with the shadow of a nod. The gear dropped with a soft thump. Flaps extended. The cabin leaned forward a degree and held. The wingtip light winked red. The runway lights rose toward them in beads of gold and white. There was a moment that felt like the pause at the top of a step. The wheels met the runway in a crisp kiss. A shiver ran through the frame. Reverse thrust came on and faded. People remembered to breathe. A laugh broke from somewhere near row 5 and ran out of itself. The plane slowed and turned and rolled toward the gate with an easy sway. "Welcome to Phoenix," the intercom said with Captain Kim's voice behind the script. He did not add anything. The crew began their end routine. Seatbelts clicked free in a wave that moved forward and back. Tessa reached for the interphone and spoke to the flight deck, then returned to 1C. She lifted the napkin with careful fingers and folded it in thirds. She did not look for permission to do it. She laid the folded napkin on the tray next to the chocolate square. "Thank you," she said, and the words covered more ground than a single sentence normally does. She touched the keepy brim with one knuckle to set it exactly straight. Her thumb brushed the scratch on her silver wings again. The scratch remained. She drew in a breath and let it out slow. Donna stood with the twins and her bag. She looked at Mason. "Thanks for the cup," she said, "and for being steady." The nearest child waved the kind of wave that is a hand opening and closing without aim. Mason opened his hand in reply. Dana smiled with the eyes of a person who had not slept enough in months, then moved into the aisle. Ruth did not stand right away. She waited until the aisle cleared a little. She leaned toward Mason and held his gaze for a second. "Safe travels," she said. Her thumb pressed the cross once. She did not reach to touch the metal that lay under the folded napkin. She did not need to. The man who had objected avoided looking at row 1 as he passed. He carried his water cup, empty fingers around it like a token. His face had shed the tight shine. At the door, he paused to thank Tessa in a voice that did not carry. Logan slung his backpack and stepped up beside Mason. "Sir, can I take your carry-on?" he said. The question stood ready to be refused. "I have it," Mason said. He slid the gloves from the pocket and pulled them on. The chalk inside the seams left a clean smell in the air like dry stone. He lifted the kepi and placed it under his arm. He stood without bracing on the seat backs. The napkins stayed on the tray table, folded and square. Passengers filtered forward in small clusters. The door opened. Warm desert air slid into the cool cabin. The jet bridge groaned as it shifted. Tessa took her place at the front with another attendant. Captain Kim stood a step back, hat on, now brim level. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said to each person. Not a script, so much as a straight sentence. When Mason reached the door, Kim held his eyes for a beat. They did not shake hands. They did not need to. "Good night," Sergeant Kim said. "Good night," Captain Mason said. Tessa's voice was very low, meant for one person. "I carry him here," she said, touching the back of her silver wings where no one could see. "That is where it stays." She held Mason's gaze squarely. "Thank you for letting me see it and not look away." Mason nodded. "Take care," he said. He stepped onto the bridge. Outside the gate, the terminal glowed in airport light that turns everything into a kind of waking. People rolled bags. Announcements bled into each other. Mason moved along the carpet and then over tile, steady keepy under his arm gloves, clean and white. June stood beyond the security line with her hands clenched in front of her chest. Her gray hair had been smoothed and then given up to the night wind. The moment she saw him, she came forward as far as the barrier allowed, and then waited for him to close the gap. When he did, she stepped into him and folded herself around the coat and the hard lines and the edges, careful with the brim of the kepi. "You look thin," she said into his shoulder voice, full and unashamed. It was neither complaint nor praise. It was inventory. "I am fine," he said. He let her hold on as long as she needed. The metal under his coat made a flat, cool place against his chest, unnoticed by anyone else. When she stepped back, she put one palm on his cheek and looked at him the way mothers look at sons of any age. "Hungry?" she said. "Yes," he said. They walked out to the curb together. The air smelled like hot concrete and citrus and engine exhaust. A shuttle bus sighed as it kneeled. June took the kepi for a second and held it like it was the right weight. She passed it back. He set it under his arm again. The night was mild. The stars looked like sugar that someone had tipped across a dark counter and left there. 2 weeks later, the barracks near Fort Myer held the kind of quiet that happens after inspection. The hallway smelled like floor wax and soap. Mail sat in a neat stack under a clipboard. Mason's name showed on an envelope with careful handwriting that rounded its corners. The return address read, Phoenix. He opened the envelope at his desk and slid out a single page. The paper had blue lines. The ink ran steady and did not blot. "Sergeant Vale, that flight changed how I hold my aisle. I still check the latches twice. I still make the coffee too strong. I also carry my brother on the back of my silver wings where only I can feel it. Enclosed is a lapel ribbon I wore on a coat for years. It is not the medal. It is a reminder. I am sending it to sit near people who understand. Thank you for standing still when I could not. Tessa." A small ribbon fell into his palm, purple with a thin white edge. It was clean and unbent. He held it for the time it took to count to 21. Then he stood and crossed to the shadow box on the wall. The box held a brass name tape, a unit patch, a coin, a folded program from a service with a date in a corner, and a photo of a man with a grin that crowded his face. Torres. Mason opened the box and set the ribbon in the lower left just above the coin. He closed the latch. Morning at Arlington came pale and cloudless. Marble took the early light and gave it back. Mason pulled on fresh gloves. The chalk line he drew on the edge was bright and fine. He adjusted his coat. He set his hat. He took his place at the line and began the measure that anyone could count and almost no one wanted to break. 21 steps. Turn. Pause. 21 seconds. Turn. The numbers did not lift him or weigh him down. They kept the shape true. He looked out over the plaza and past the rows that ran straight as rails. A breeze moved across the stone with a sound like paper sliding once across a desk. The city beyond the trees was already alive. He kept his eyes where they were meant to be. The chalk felt dry and clean against his palm. The purple at his chest rested under cloth, the metal a cool, honest weight. He counted and walked. The boots met marble. The sound was the only sound that mattered. The line held. The light rose. The rhythm stayed. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.